Good evening. Welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm David Kramer. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. You can get updates to the forecast or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. Also, call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. I also want to take this time to introduce one of our newest TV meteorologists. We have Joel Curtis joining us today. He's going to have his first broadcast for the aviation section of this forecast. Again, that's Joel Curtis, who's just joined our TV team. We're excited to have him on board. Taking a look now, we'll look at the advisories that we have out for the state. Both are up north. We have one for the southeastern portions of the Brooks Range that is in effect until midnight tonight. And that is for snow and blowing snow. And no, snow has been occurring already, so the storm total snowfall, including what's already fallen, is going to be 2 to 4 inches. And we are going to have some blowing snow as we will have winds, especially through the passes, gusting up to as high as 35 miles per hour. Could drop visibility down to a half mile or less at times. And this is especially focused on any of the passes going through the Brooks Range. Then down in the eastern portion of the Alaska Range, we have a wind advisory in effect that is also out until midnight tonight. They're going to see winds through the area 25 to 35 miles per hour with gusts up to as high as 55 miles per hour expected. We did have that flash flood watch out for southeast Alaska, particularly up in the Haines area. That has now expired. However, that does not mean that the threat has gone away entirely. Some of the things that are still going to be impacting the area, we still have saturated ground. We have light precipitation expected over the next few days. Some of those areas are going to remain unstable, and we want everybody to stay vigilant, especially near the steep terrain, and monitor conditions for any changes. Some of the things that you can look for potential slides in the area are creek water becoming brown, cracking of drywall or shifting walls in homes, cracks in land pavement and in driveways, ground movement of any kind, trees falling over, overwhelming wells and wet basements, and pooling of water. So again, the flash flood watch has expired, but again, that does not mean that the threat has gone away. And if you see any of these changing conditions, please call the Emergency Operations Center in Haines at 907-766-6445. We also have some snow expected for the eastern portions of the Kenai Peninsula. We're going to see ranges in the Seward area from 10 to 12 inches expected, and this is for Wednesday. And this does include the corridor from Seward through Moose Pass. It's going to start Wednesday morning, go through Wednesday afternoon. Going to be a heavy wet snow expected, and visibility could drop down to a quarter mile at less in some of the heavier snow areas. Again, that is going to be primarily from Seward through Moose Pass, and we could have up to a foot of snow expected along the Seward Highway in those locations. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we have one low that is out over the Bristol Bay area with its old boundary pushing through southwest Alaska and moving through south central Alaska as well. We can see some of the cloud cover out ahead of this pushing into those locations and moving into the Alaska Range as well. On the back side of this low, we can see some northerly winds out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, bringing some showers to the area. And finally, out by the western Aleutian Islands, we can see the next system is on the way, bringing some cloud cover in to the central and western Aleutians. Taking a look now at the weather for the remainder of the day, we'll start off with that low out by the western Aleutians, starting to bring some snow out ahead of the front itself towards the central and western Aleutians, with some warmer air behind it, transitioning that snow to a rain and snow mix as we get closer towards the front. Then out over the Bristol Bay area, we have our low pressure system and old boundary pushing through southwest Alaska, bringing snow to the southwestern areas, as well as down into the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutian Islands. We're going to see some snow as this boundary pushes through for the Kenai Peninsula area, as well as much of south central Alaska, with some of that heavier snow on the eastern portion of the Kenai Peninsula. You're going to see some lighter snow for the western portions of the interior, and then some snowfall up through the Brooks Range, where we will have those areas of blowing snow in the southeastern portions of the Brooks Range, and then some snow up along the Arctic coastline that will be accompanied with fog as well. Out over the Gulf of Alaska, a little bit warmer out over the Gulf, we'll see a mixture of rain and snow expected, with more rain as we get further to the east, especially for much of the Panhandle area. However, as we get to farther north locations, we are expecting to see some areas transition over to snow, especially as we get to the higher elevations of the coastal mountains. As we move into tonight, continuing to see rain and snow for much of the panhandle. Low-lying areas for the central and southern locations are expected to be rain, with snow as we get to some of the mountains. And northern locations also expecting to have more snow, and then we're going to see that mix of rain and snow along the North Gulf Coast with more snow as we get into those coastal ranges. And then more snow spreading out through much of south central Alaska, as well as through southwest Alaska down through Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and the eastern Aleutian Islands. Still going to see some snow throughout the interior as well as the central and eastern portions of the Brooks Range and then the Arctic coastline. Arctic coastline will still see some of the areas of fog underneath the high pressure further to the north. With our low pressure system out by the western Aleutians front pushing closer to the Aleutian Islands, bringing snow to the central and western Aleutians with that rain snow line coming up from the south, we will also see some stronger winds accompanying with this front. Then on Wednesday, that front is going to push into the Aleutian Islands, bringing a rain-snow mix to the central Aleutians. Snow out ahead of that frontal system with some stronger winds as well. Low pressure out over the western portion of the Gulf of Alaska, going to bring some precipitation to south central Alaska with primarily snow, but a rain-snow mix along the Gulf coastline, and a new system coming up from the south, bringing some warmer air back to southeast Alaska, transitioning over to snow as we get farther to the north. Interior Alaska going to see some lighter snow as well as through the Brooks Range and the Arctic coastline, where we'll continue to see areas of fog in the Arctic. Finally, on Thursday, the system out west, main low out over the central Aleutian Islands. That front's starting to break down as a new low is formed off of the old boundary by the eastern Aleutian Islands, bringing a rain-snow mix to the Aleutians, as well as some snow out to the central and northern places of the Bering Sea, and some stronger winds out over the Bering as well. Out over mainland Alaska, eastern locations are going to see some lighter snow, and that's going to extend up to the western Arctic coastline, where we'll see some areas of fog as well. Some rain snow continuing along the eastern portions of the North Gulf Coast, and then down into the panhandle areas. Our system moves out over the eastern portions of the Gulf of Alaska. Expecting more rain at low-lying areas with snow higher in elevation and areas farther to the north. Taking a look now at our temps, you'll notice some different maps that we're showing. We are showing zoomed in maps for some of these areas. We're going to test this out over these upcoming weeks. If you have any feedback for that, whether you like them or dislike them and like the old way that we did it, please send feedback to me, david.kramer@noaa.gov. We appreciate any concerns that you might have or any questions that you have on these new maps. Starting off in southeast Alaska for those morning lows for Wednesday morning, dropping down into the mid to lower 30s throughout southeast, with Juneau down to 34, Haines down to 32 degrees. Out over south central Alaska, temperatures dropping into the 20s for most locations, a little bit cooler for the interior locations, Glen Allen getting down to 11 degrees and Talkeetna down to 17, with Kodiak down to 28. Up in the interior, we are going to see temperatures drop down below zero for most locations, with colder temperatures in the western portions of the interior, with Ambler getting down to minus 23 degrees, staying below zero along the Arctic coastline as well. But as we get down the west coast of the state, some areas on the far western locations only are staying above zero, with 16 expected for Gamble. Then down in the southwestern portions of the state, interior locations below zero, single digits for much of the coastline, and then in the 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, near 30 for the Aleutian Islands. Wednesday afternoon highs in southeast, getting up into the mid-30s northern locations, near 40 for southern locations. Right around 30 for much of south central Alaska, colder in interior locations. In the interior, we're going to see temperatures getting above zero for central and eastern locations, staying below zero out west, staying below zero along the Arctic coastline as well. However, the west coast going to get above zero into the teens for far western locations. Down in southeast Alaska, temperatures going to get near zero in interior locations, in the teens as we get closer towards the water, near 30 for the Alaska Peninsula, and near 40 for the Aleutian Islands. For Thursday morning, dropping down to near freezing for the Aleutian Islands. Below zero for most locations throughout mainland Alaska, with western interior seeing temperatures drop down to the minus 20s. Then south central Alaska staying in the teens for the most part, and then near 30 for much of the Panhandle. Finally, for Thursday afternoon, getting up to near 40 for the southern locations of the Panhandle, into the teens for south central Alaska, warmer as we get near the coast, staying below zero for most of mainland Alaska that's not near the water, and then in the teens along the west coast, and then near 40 for the Aleutian Islands, with 34 degrees expected for a high for St. Paul.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And now for your aviation weather. Starting out Wednesday morning, we have extensive area of IFR along the northern portion of the state. Also some over the Alaska Range and down into the Alaska Peninsula, along the North Gulf Coast, along the eastern side of the Panhandle, as well as moving into the western Aleutians. On Wednesday afternoon, you can see some good VFR along most of the west coast, extensive IFR along the central portion of the state, including the Alaska Range, also northern Prince William Sound and the eastern Kenai Peninsula, as well as northern southeast Alaska and over by the Hyder area. Also, we have, again, some IFR moving into the central Bering Sea. On Thursday morning, IFR over the central portion of the state, including the Alaska Range and some of the Brooks Range, a little along the north Chukchi coast, some in the Portage area and eastern Prince William Sound, as well as northern southeast Alaska. On Thursday afternoon, much of that has now become marginal VFR or VFR, with northern southeast Alaska still in IFR, a little bit along the north coast, and as well as the central Bering Sea and down to the Alaska Peninsula and Unimak Island. Our pass conditions on Wednesday: Anatuvik Pass, IFR; Adigan Pass, IFR becoming marginal VFR; Lake Clark, IFR, and Merrill, IFR. Wednesday pass conditions, IFR and rainy. And IFR at windy. Isabel Pass, IFR. Mentasta Pass, marginal VFR becoming VFR on Wednesday. Tonita Pass, marginal VFR. Portage, marginal VFR becoming IFR. And on Wednesday all day, IFR for Chilkat Pass and White Pass. Our freezing levels are down at the surface for most of the state, and you can see a little bit of 2,000 foot freezing level over Prince of Wales Island. For icing on Wednesday, much of the state is low-level icing below 2,000 feet for isolated moderate, out in the Aleutians and Bering Sea, between 3,000 and 8,000 feet, isolated moderate. And we have one area of considerable moderate icing, and that will be along the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and the North Gulf Coast into northern southeast Alaska. All of that will be below 10,000 feet. For the rest of the Panhandle and in the Gulf, between 3,000 and 8,000 feet for isolated moderate. Looking at our jet stream, we have some circulation going on in the Aleutians up to 115 knots, some southerlies becoming westerlies over the central portion of the state, 50 knots, and 70 knots out in the Gulf. Our 9,000 winds are dependent on several circulation centers through the Bering Strait, down across western Alaska, across Unimak Island, down across the Alaska Peninsula, 40 to 45 knots. Across the center of the state, about 35 knots out of the southwest. Over the western Gulf, about 40 knots or so. And then out over the Aleutians, 55 knots in that circulation with the approaching weather system out there. At 3,000 foot wind, again, those systems are really showing up with a northerly flow about 40 knots along the west coast, 35 knots over the Alaska Peninsula, and out of the southwest, 35 knots south of the Kenai Peninsula. And that circulation system, we have a low-level jet along the front at about 75 knots out in the western Aleutians. Our turbulence, again with that northerly flow over the west coast, below 4,000 feet all along the west coast, and considerable moderate. Off the Alaska Peninsula and around the Sitkinak Island area, we have below 3,000 feet, also considerable moderate down over near Coal Bay. And then finally over the Aleutians, we're expecting considerable moderate turbulence below 3,000 feet for almost the entire Aleutians. Well, that's it for our weather today. Fly safe. Thank you for your attention.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful tsunami hit Japan, destroying cities and villages. As the water receded back into the ocean, it pulled what remained of buildings, cars, boats, and homes along with it. Scrap metals, plastics, and objects of all shapes and sizes either sank near the shore or floated away. In the days that followed, large masses of floating debris could easily be seen by satellite imagery and aerial photos. In the wake of this disaster, NOAA is assessing the potential impact that the debris may have on U.S. shores. So, where will this debris go, and when will it get there? To help answer those questions, scientists are using computer models to estimate the debris' path, using its starting location in the tsunami zone and historical weather and ocean conditions. The findings are that some debris could pass near or wash ashore in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as early as this winter. Debris may also approach the west coast of the United States in 2013 and potentially circle back to the main Hawaiian Islands in 2014. But scientists caution that there are limitations to what computer models can tell us, now that the debris has moved out of satellite view, and with currents and winds in the Pacific constantly changing, there is no guarantee that the debris will stay on the predicted path. Items will sink along the way, or break up and disperse in many directions. Despite these unknowns, NOAA and its partners are collecting data, assessing possible impacts, and making preparations in case debris does wash ashore. The 2011 tsunami in Japan reminds us that the devastation that happens on land can also become a marine debris issue at sea.
Imagine all of this underwater. In a major tsunami, it could happen. In this part of Washington state, it's happened before, hundreds of years ago. Sometime in the future, it will likely happen again. But we can be ready. If a tsunami strikes, this school will provide a place for people to ride it out above the waves.
We're in Westport, Washington, and right behind me is the very first tsunami vertical evacuation center in the United States.
This is an emergency. Please walk to the nearest exit. Go to the stair tower and proceed up the stairs.
Tsunamis are a potential hazard for low-lying coastal areas. That's why many coastal communities have plans in place to get people to safety, high ground or inland, where they can be beyond the reach of a tsunami. Often there are signs showing where to go and where to gather. Most tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes along subduction zones, where two of Earth's plates collide and one is forced under the other. Westport and other Pacific Northwest coastal communities are especially at risk because one of these zones lies just offshore. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. An earthquake here caused a tsunami in 1700 that flooded shores as far away as Japan. Experts say it's just a matter of time before it happens again. Since the subduction zone is so close, a tsunami like the one in 1700 could strike before people in some low-lying areas could get to high ground or inland. And Westport doesn't have a lot of high ground or easy routes inland.
If we get an earthquake or a tsunami, we're going to get a lot of water in the area really quickly, and we needed a place to go. So our community built this brand new school, and above our gym and cafeteria, we have a roof. And so the idea is that we'll get all of our students up, and anybody from the community who needs to get up, they can get up there as well.
Ocosta Elementary School might seem like a normal school, but look more closely. It's engineered to withstand monster waves. Tsunami vertical evacuation shelters must be able to resist the powerful forces that a tsunami brings. hydrodynamic, buoyant, hydrostatic, and debris impact forces and strong currents. They're also designed to help people get to safety quickly.
There are 4 big staircases on each corner of the building, and each one of those staircases is 8 feet wide, and we can get the whole school evacuated in about 4.5 minutes.
Everybody should be at a 0.
On the roof of the building, there is water and food and buckets and shelters and tarps and blankets and different things so that we can be up there for 2, 3, maybe 4 days while we wait for rescue.
You can go to the top and you know you'll be safe. It feels really nice to have a special building because you feel protected.
This community decided that a tsunami evacuation center was important because they didn't have anywhere to go, and they decided to use their money to build the building. The additional cost is anywhere between 10 and 20% of the actual building cost itself, and that's really a sound investment for a lot of protection. You may be there a while, but you're safe and you're secure, and that's the most important thing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for the marine section of the forecast. We'll start off with a quick look at our ice edge. We have ice continuing to fill in over the Chukchi Sea, and that's expected to continue to grow for the next couple days. Down the west coast, we're having some new ice growth as well, and that is also expected to continue to grow for the next several days. We have some new ice even on the southern side of St. Lawrence Island. However, we're not expecting that to last through the season at this point in time. Taking a look now in southeast Alaska for Wednesday, southerly winds in the inside waters, 15 to 20 knots expected. South to southeast winds over the Gulf and northern locations, 15 knots, getting up to as high as 30 knots as we get further to the south. Seas up to as high as 12 feet. On Tuesday, flow out over the northern Gulf, westerly winds 15 to 25 knots, getting stronger as we get further to the east. Then some easterly winds 30 knots in the central portions, and westerly winds 25 knots in the southern portions of the eastern Gulf. In the inside waters, northern locations, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots, and then becoming southeast 30 in the southern locations. On Wednesday for south central Alaska, southerly winds throughout the Gulf waters 15 to 25 knots, getting stronger as we move further to the west. Westerly winds 25 knots west of the Barren Islands, and then in the Cook Inlet area, east to south winds 15 to 20 knots, strongest as we get further to the south. Prince William Sound, southeast winds 15 knots. On Thursday in the Cook Inlet area, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots, picking up to 30 knots out of Kamishak Bay, and then westerly winds 25 knots east of the Barren Islands. The rest of the Gulf is going to see westerly winds 15 to 25 knots, again strongest further to the west. Prince William Sound and northerly winds 10 knots expected. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Wednesday, west to northwest winds through our locations, around 20 knots near Kodiak Island, and then around the peninsula around 25 knots. Seas up to as high as 11 feet, highest on the Pacific side. On Thursday, flow switching up quite a bit, going to see a lot more southeast to easterly winds, 30 to 40 knots on the Bering side, 25 to 40 knots on the Pacific side, with the highest wind speeds further to the west. Around Kodiak Island, west to northwest winds, 15 knots expected. For the Aleutian Islands on Wednesday, we're going to see primarily east to southeast winds, 35 knots by the eastern Aleutians, 45 to 50 knots by the central Aleutians, and 45 knots by the western Aleutians. Seas up to as high as 25 feet, highest on the Pacific side. On Thursday, we're going to see a lot more southerly flow with some southeast winds as well, 45 knots by the eastern Aleutians, 20 to 30 knots by the central Aleutians, 25 knots for some of the areas of the western Aleutians, and then becoming northerly winds, especially as we get towards the Shimia Island area, around 30 knots there, with seas up to as high as 21 feet by those western Aleutians. Along the west coast of the state, right along the coastline, we are going to see northerly winds, 15 knots in Norton Sound, 30 knots by St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots by Nunavik Island, and then 15 knots by St. Matthew Island. Down by the Pribilof Islands, easterly winds, 25 knots expected. On Thursday, seeing quite a bit more of an easterly component with some northeast winds further to the north. Strongest winds are going to be for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilof Islands up to as high as 50 feet, with seas up to as high as 28 feet. Then 40 knots by Nunavik Island, 30 knots by St. Lawrence Island, and 10 knots in Norton Sound. Along the Arctic coastline, we're going to see primarily northeast winds, 15 to 20 knots along the Arctic coast, 25 to 30 knots down the west coast, becoming more northerly as we approach the Bering Strait area, where we'll see 30 knots expected. Then on Thursday along the Arctic coastline, 15 to 25 knots out of an easterly direction, strongest in areas farther to the east. Then down the west coast, we're going to see more of a northerly component, 15 to 30 knots, strongest as we get to the southern areas of the Bering Strait. For a recap of our weather for tonight, we have our low that's over Bristol Bay now that will move over the Alaska Peninsula, continuing to bring snow throughout the Aleutian Islands, for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, much of south central Alaska, as well as into the interior, and we will still see some areas of blowing snow for the southeastern portions of the Brooks Range, especially through the passes that will last until midnight tonight. We have a winter weather advisory out for those blowing snow conditions, and some areas of snow and fog along the Arctic coastline. Down in the Panhandle area, southerly winds are going to bring a rain and snow mix to central and southern locations, with snow in the higher elevations and rain closer towards the water. In northern locations, we'll see more snow, and then another system is coming by the western Aleutian Islands, bringing some snow to the central and western Aleutians, with some warmer air coming up behind that. As we move into Wednesday, that warmer air is going to mix that with the snow, bringing a rain and snow mix to the central Aleutian Islands, and some stronger winds are also going to be associated with this front. We're going to have lingering snow through much of mainland Alaska, especially the western interior down into south central Alaska, and some areas of fog up along the Arctic coastline. Along the North Gulf Coast, however, we'll see a mixture of rain and snow, with rain and snow conditions for much of the Panhandle. And then finally on Thursday, continued rain and snow conditions for the Panhandle, with central and southern locations at low-lying areas seeing primarily rain, and then snow at higher elevations and further to the north. The other system is bringing quite a bit of rain and snow to the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal, pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.